Hi guys, Dean here again. This is a video response to James Griffiths' 100 subs competition. So first of all, congratulations James on reaching 100. I'm surprised it took you too long, this long actually. I find James different to a lot of other people in the VC that although all of us have quite a lot of passion about the subject and the music that we listen to obviously, I find James is very eloquent at putting his views and passion forward, unlike the rest of us, well certainly me anyway, I include that. So I find him a pleasure to watch and speak to as well on a regular basis, so it's always good to have another fellow UK member. There's not many of us at all, so yeah, it's definitely good to have James in the VC, so he's done really well so far, so I'll continue to look forward to many more videos from him. So this essentially was, he showed a few albums which were albums that when you listen to them reminded him of a particular person. And as all of us have watched High Fidelity, it sort of reminded me of that scene where he's reorganising his record collection, and he's doing it autobiographically, so he has to remember, you know, if he's looking for a Fleetwood Mac album, that he bought it for this girl but for personal reasons didn't give it to her in the summer of blah blah blah. And it does, music is, it triggers memories from our past, so it makes sense that, you know, when you're listening to either a piece of music or an album in particular, it would remind you of a person or persons or a time in your life. So yeah, I mean, there was so many to choose from really, so I've tried to narrow it down, and strangely enough all these albums are pretty much in the same sort of 1 if not 2 year period of when I either listened to them, bought them, or of that reminder era. So anyway, enough of me waffling, otherwise this video is going to be about half an hour long. I picked 4 out. I think 4 is a decent sort of size number, not to bore people with. So let's get straight down to it and I'll explain, obviously, as I go along. First one, let's get it out of the way. Iron Maiden, Live After Death. And I think I mentioned certainly how I started listening to Iron Maiden, which essentially was watching the Live After Death full-length video, and obviously listen to the album thereafter. The chap, so every time I listen to this basically I'm always reminded of the video and the guy that basically put me onto Maiden and essentially changed my life forever, and that chap is Jonathan Drake. Jonathan was a fellow at my school with me. I was going to say fellow colleague, but not really a colleague, fellow pupil. So yeah, I mean, we were in the same form, so we spent a lot of time together anyway, regardless of sort of musical taste. And this was secondary school, so I knew Jonathan from the ages of 11 through to sort of 16 at school anyway. And it was around the sort of time, I think as I said previously, around 1987, so I would have been 15. I knew he was an Iron Maiden fan. I wasn't into sort of Iron Maiden, or certainly metal really, until around that sort of time, sort of late 86, 87 time, probably towards 87. I sort of got into metal a lot sort of towards the end of my school days, but yeah, he, after many arguments of saying I wasn't interested, don't want to watch it, he basically put on the video for me to watch, and I was hooked. So many thanks, Jonathan Drake. Haven't been in touch with him. I think we lost touch about 3 years later when I was about 18, 19. He moved, I used to live in a place called Gainsborough, which is between Lincoln and Scunthorpe, and he moved to Southampton to become a teacher, which was a surprise to most of us, if not all of us that knew him. And I haven't really heard much from him since. I think he did move back to Gainsborough and became a teacher in my old school apparently. But no, just haven't got back in touch. Don't have his contact details. But yeah, I've certainly got a lot to thank him for. So if you're watching this, Jonathan, if you're still into the Maiden, which I'm sure you are, if you're into vinyl, maybe you might be watching this, drop us a line. So, Jonathan Drake, number 1, Live After Death, and a cracking album, but obviously you guys know that already. So second, which again, just keeping on the school theme, it's Whitesnake, 1987. Now yeah, I think I probably got into Whitesnake before I got into Iron Maiden. I was into the rockier side of things. I know I was into the 70s rock, free and so forth, stuff like that, before I got into the metal. And I remember playing, not the vinyl version, the would have been CD or tape, I can't remember, quite possibly tape. I remember playing this in our lunch break in our maths class at school, and the teacher, Mr. Sargent, I can't remember his first name, I'm tempted to say John, but I don't think it was John. He sort of came in, it was his classroom anyway, so he essentially came in to start the lesson at the end of the lunch period, and sort of asked the question straight off the bat, you know, whose music is this? You know, who's listening to this? And like me, and I think it was Jonathan was up, Drake as well, also put hands up. So no, so it's us, sir, it's us. Oh, didn't realise you guys were into Led Zeppelin, and we sort of looked at each other and thinking, who are Led Zeppelin? And we didn't know Led Zeppelin were at that time. Certainly didn't know what they sounded like. So it's not Led Zeppelin, sir, it's Whitesnake. It's like, no, it's Led Zeppelin. So, no, sir, it's Whitesnake. And we tried to try and explain who Whitesnake were to him. And he knew of David Coverdale, but he didn't realise this was Whitesnake. And I suppose this album, in particular, that their stage in their career was possibly a bit of a departure from the previous stuff they'd done. So the more the bluesy rock side of things. But yeah, Mr. Sargent, he was, from that point onwards, we sort of developed a bit of a relationship as well with regards to music. I found out he only lived literally about 3 doors down from where I did with my parents at the time. So I went over to his house, and his record collection was vast. So he, again, sort of got me into the whole ethos of vinyl, collecting. And I possibly got the collecting bug from him, just seeing the sheer vastness. I mean, we were talking, I think, I'm sure it was in his loft. He had a loft that had been decked out, and I'm sure it's pretty much wall-to-wall vinyl. And we traded some vinyl, probably over the next year or two before I left school. But yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, he was possibly the man responsible for the collecting bug, certainly once I got into Iron Maiden anyway, and obviously that sort of helped matters. But so yeah, number 2, instead of me waffling around, Mr. Sargent, possibly a John, my maths teacher at school. Yeah, thank you, sir, for letting us play Whitesnake in lunch break in your classroom, amongst many other tunes. But yeah, when I listen to this, I certainly remember that chap. Top teacher as well, fantastic teacher, really down to earth, fantastic sense of humour, a great record collection. Right, next, James will recognise this one because he just showed it in his last video. Paul McCartney. I'm a big fan of Paul McCartney, probably more so of his stuff than the Beatles. Do love the Beatles though, but I'm probably more in the McCartney camp than I'm in the John Lennon camp, but that's just the way it is. But this album, when I listen to this album, this reminds me of a guy, again going back to Gainsborough, and again it was the same era. There was a shop called the Record Cellar, cellar as in basement, which was in Gainsborough, and it was probably one of the smallest shops you could ever hope to find. It's probably no bigger than this room that I'm standing in at the moment, and you literally walk through the door and he had some vinyl on some shelves here, racks, some CDs on this side of the wall, and you could probably fit about maybe 2-3 people in widthways, and then he had the counter at the end. And the chap that I used to see in the record shop was Jonathan again. They're not all Jonathan, I don't think. So yeah, this chap was called Jonathan. I can't for the life of me remember what his surname was. I was trying to Google him earlier, but I can't find his surname. For some reason I seem to think it was S. It was either Stapleton, something along those sort of lines, but yeah, I just can't remember for the life of me. He'll know. But anyway, I think it was his mother that actually owned the record shop, and he used to work there pretty much most of the time I went in, he was there. So we used to talk about music. He was probably about 2 years older than me, so I'd have been about 15, 16 at the time, like I said previously, so he was like 18 essentially. He was at college, he was in band, so this was a guy that had the musical knowledge. This was a guy that I looked up to as well. I mean, he was really into the Beatles. He was a huge Paul McCartney fan, hence why this album, I think he put me onto this album initially. I was aware of the Beatles stuff at that point. I was aware of the Wings stuff at that point. Wasn't particularly aware of Paul McCartney per se as the solo artist. So I think he gave me a copy of this, and he gave me a copy of McCartney 2, I think, from memory. And yeah, by this, absolutely blown away. As I recently mentioned to James, I think the collaboration with Elvis Costello, the interplay on You Want Her Too is just fantastic. For me, that is the standout track on the album, along with Distractions and We Got Married. So those three together there, was just killer. I mean, I think this is a really underrated album. I know James seemed to think that people have sort of looked back at the album maybe not so fondly. And I also mentioned that I love Flaming Pie as well, which sort of came, I think he did on higher ground after this, which I still haven't got on vinyl. And then Flaming Pie, which I haven't showed previously in a video. But yeah, Flaming Pie I think is pretty much on par, maybe nudges this one, but for me this is classic Paul McCartney. Yeah, it's got all the different elements. It's got the rockier tracks, it's got the laid back tracks, it's got the slightly experimental sort of different sounding tracks on it, and it's short and to the point, so it's not a long drawn out album, which I sort of agree with James when he mentioned about Flaming Pie, which I've still got to reply to him. Yeah, I can see where it's coming from, but I do like it. It is a fantastic album. So yeah, Jonathan, going back to what this video is all about. Jonathan is, I say, he worked at the record shop. The record shop sadly shut down when I was probably about 17, maybe 18. And I was still living in Gainsborough at the time. He, for a while, started writing a music column in the local newspaper. So obviously he was leaving college, or had left college by this point. Then I think he went down to Bournemouth to work for a newspaper down there, and I never heard from him since. I mean, we didn't exchange contact details. I mean, he was the guy in the record shop, but never really saw each other. Didn't socialise together. And like I say, I was still at school, so it's not like I was going down to the pub with him or anything. But yeah, he was definitely, as far as musical knowledge goes, a key figure in my life. So again, another Jonathan, if you're watching this, if you remember me from the record seller Gainsborough, I'm sure you're still fantastically obsessed with Paul McCartney and all things Beatles related. And Charles Bronson, he used to go on about Charles Bronson Appreciation Society, the Seabass as he called it. There was little, yeah, fantastic times. Yeah, great guy, and again, another key inspiration for me, as was Mr. Paul McCartney. So finally, as I feel that I'm rambling far too much and this video is dragging on, yeah, the final album is Metallica and Justice for All. So as I said at the start of this video, way back, they're all pretty much sort of 1987, 88, 89 albums, bar the Live After Death, which is 85, but I didn't get to it until 87. So it's within that sort of era. You all know this album. This is the original Vertigo pressing. Sounds absolutely superb on the double album. Far better than those horrible blackened reissues. Please, if you want Metallica on vinyl, do not buy the blackened reissues. The mastering is poor. The pressing quality is poor. Seek out the originals. You probably end up paying possibly £5 more for an original in perfect condition than you would the blackened version, and there's no comparison, trust me. Rant over. So this, yeah, there was a guy again I went to school with called Ian Christian. Now he, I say, stayed with us all through. He was in a sort of a part of our group that we used to hang around with. He didn't have a huge influence on me with regards to music. And again, he was one of those guys that sort of almost kept himself to himself. I can't really remember his musical taste, to be honest. What I do remember from him was he came over to mine once, and I'd just purchased this, which was on CD actually. I mean, I think I'd ditched the vinyl by that point. I was buying CDs. Maybe I still had some vinyl, but I remember listening to it on CD anyway. And he came over. I was quite intrigued as to the musicality of the album, because I think he probably would have come in to the room as I was listening to it. My parents would let him in, and I was probably halfway through Blackened or something anyway, or one of the heavier tracks, and it was probably full on Metallica onslaught, bang bang bang, and then all of a sudden it would take a step back and it would be a bit more chilled, a lot more melody and stuff going on. And I think obviously they were classed as a thrash band. He was aware of Metallica at the time. I'd spoken about Metallica, and I think he may have listened to, or I had played him other stuff, Ride the Lightning, Kill 'Em All, and so forth. Maybe even Master of Puppets, but yeah, when this album came along, I think he sort of got his attention a bit. I do remember we listened to this album a few times, and he really liked it from memory. So for some reason, yeah, I mean, that sort of stuck with me. So when I do listen to this album, I do think of Ian, and us essentially just chilling out in our bedroom and just listening to a bit of Metallica in our formative years. So what happened to Ian? That's a funny story. Ian, he went to university at Nottingham, Trent University, and I did go and visit him a few times over there. And then he went to Cardiff University, I think. Did he initially go to Trent? I'm sure he went to Nottingham, Trent initially, and then he went down to Cardiff University. And it's towards the end of his 3-year stint at uni that he'd come up back to Gainsborough, and he needed, for whatever reason, his either train ticket had fallen through. He couldn't afford his train ticket, or his ride had fallen through. I can't remember the ins and outs. I also remember he'd got together with this girl who was French, and I think she lived in France, but she was at uni over here, I think, or she maybe lived over here but was going back to visit family. So I know he was going to France within the next few weeks. So the idea was that I offered to take him down to Cardiff. I'd spend the night in Cardiff, but I think he was going, that was it, he was going straight, pretty much meeting his girlfriend, going straight to hers. I think they were going away the following morning across to France. So essentially I went down to Cardiff. I'd stayed at his dorm, so I dumped all my gear there, went across to the local bar, had a few pints of Guinness and retired, and drove back the following morning. I think I had some work down in Cardiff as well, so I think that's probably why I offered to give him a lift. But anyway, the idea was obviously that he was going to France for a couple of weeks, meeting the family, coming back. Obviously we'd get together and stuff anyway and chill out. I never heard from him again. That was the weirdest, strangest thing. A friend of mine as well, that had been friends with him pretty much since birth, also nothing. So Mr. Ian Christian, again, if you're watching this, which I'm probably likely to say that you're not, because of the fact that you weren't hugely into music as such, but if for any reason anybody knows Mr. Ian Christian, that I'm sure he got married to a French girl, from the rumours on the grapevine, as it were. Get in touch, mate, because it's been about 20-ish years now since I dropped you off, and I've never heard from you since. But yeah, anyway, Metallica, Justice for All. This reminds me of that guy. Yeah, cool. So that's wrap the video up. Eventually, you will say. So yeah, thanks, James. Great idea. I could have probably pulled out another 50 or so from the collection. But yeah, cracking idea. Congratulations again on the 100 subs, mate. I'm sure it won't be too long before you get to 200. You're a pleasure to watch. You're a pleasure to talk to. And yeah, good luck to everybody else in the competition. Cheers, guys.